Hi everyone, for those that don't know me, my name is Grant Loon. I work with Fidelity National Title, and today, like Rick said, I'll be going over how to effectively research properties. This is something that, myself as a title rep, I tend to do day to day. It's researching properties quickly for clients, getting them good information, making sure that they feel confident when going into a conversation with a seller or a buyer. So I was going to show you the tools that I use and then also generally what I look for, etc. That way, ideally, you can feel a little bit confident as well when you're interacting with those clients. So ultimately, today we'll be going through what I consider a nice five-step roadmap for smarter, more confident research when talking to clients. So one that'll be starting with the right research tool. We'll go into that and I'll show you effectively how to use that. Two will be knowing how to find properties effectively, knowing the different ways you can pinpoint properties and then how to go about doing that. The third will be once you've found a property, knowing what to look for. So we'll be looking at a property together, looking at the different parts of that property history or characteristics that we have access to, and how I look at those and some of the red flags that you might see commonly and how to address those. And then fourth, we'll look into turning that research that you're going to be doing and using the tools that I'll be showing you, and then how to take that research and make it into a nice, valuable piece you can give to clients. So at the end of this, you'll walk away with an ability to create something like this for all of your clients for any property almost nationwide now, which is a great resource. So you'll have this resource to be able to share with your clients moving forward. And then at the end, I'll also go over some limitations of some of the research that just you'll be able to do as a real estate professional that even I face, as a title representative where I need to go for extra help with, some of our title officers, etc. So ideally today you'll have some tools to start researching properties a little bit better, whether you're on the go, on the computer, wherever you are, and feel confident, talking to some of your clients. So I'll be jumping into it. I know we're, 30 minutes time wise, so feel free to jump in with questions if you have them along the way, and happy to get you started. So, step one, in terms of effectively researching property, I think it's most important to have a good tool for property research when you're, preparing for a listing presentation or maybe helping your buyer put in an offer. I think it's great to have a reliable tool to be able to do that. Ultimately, why I think it matters is because if you have a nice tool, you don't have to go to many different sources to get information before, a meeting with a seller. You can just go to one app, one website, get almost everything you might need to have an educated conversation, but then also stand out in those conversations. So, in my recommendation and the tool that we'll be going over today is one of our new apps that we have from Fidelity National Title called Farm in Here. So, for people that did register, I believe I set you all up on accounts. You should have an activation link in your email. It'll look something like this. It'll say your farm in here access is almost ready. You'll come in here and you'll be able to activate your free account. So if you're on the Zoom now, maybe check your email. You might be able to activate that account and play along with some of these features as I go about it myself. But it's a great resource in the sense that it updates daily. So this Farm in Here application that I'll be going over will update its data daily for you. So any ownership changes, any key features like delinquencies, foreclosures, etc., will be updated daily as well. So you can make sure that when you're looking at information, it's information that has been pulled from that county assessor, county recorder, no matter what county it is, and has been updated daily for you. And the other nice thing, like I said, is it is a nationwide search. So now you're not just limited to property records in, your local area. Let's say you have a client that maybe owns a property in a different state that wants some information from you. You can use this resource and pull nationwide data as well. So it's a great resource for that. And the other great thing, in my opinion, is it works amazingly well both on your computer and your mobile devices. So no matter where you are, you can, pop on here. It's the same account and it's going to work really well for you. So I can come in here, search for properties, and we'll go more into how this works. But then also too, works and looks great on the phone. So here's a sample of what it might look for you as you're on your iPhone, being able to come in here and search around for properties, for example. So in my opinion, Farm in Here is a great resource for this. Of course, you as realtors are going to have other ones, but just this is the application we'll be using for our webinar today. And for those that don't have an application and you have no idea how to get to Farm in Here, we've made it easy. I'll share these slides with everyone. Let me put it in the chat really quick. If you click on the link in the chat, you'll be taken to these slides where if you click on this button here, you'll be taken to our main website, lunatitleteam.com. That's where you'll see some of our apps and you'll see this Farm in Here application for future reference. So you can always click on it. You can click Launch Farm in Here, be taken to this app directly. And if you don't have an account, of course, you can request a login from us here. So click Request Login, submit your information, and we'll send an activation link to you. And then also, of course, let's say it's been weeks, months have passed, you want walkthroughs on these apps, we have video guides for you. So that's a great way for how to find these tools. So step two in effectively researching properties, in my opinion, is knowing how to find properties. So once you've, committed to using a tool, in this case, we'll be using Farm in here as the application for this. It's really knowing, how to be able to pinpoint properties. There might be times it's very simple and you can search properties by addresses, but sometimes it might be a little bit difficult. Maybe you just met someone at an open house and all you have is an owner's name, or maybe it's a vacant piece of land, and you don't have a property address and you need to find a way to find it, see who owns it, see, anything associated with it, etc. So luckily the same application, Farm in here, makes it really easy to go about the different ways you might need to find properties. So when you're signed in here, the first time you'll be taken to this homepage where you can start your search for properties. And the main way you really can go about finding properties, like I said, would be an address search. That's, 123 Main Street, searching by an owner's name. And what's nice about this application, it'll find multiple properties owned by these owners. The other thing would be an assessor's parcel number search. So if it doesn't have an address, like I said, searching by that identifier from the assessor. So we'll go through a couple of examples here to show you how this works within this application. So the first one would be searching by, property address. So let's say I'm in here, I have a presentation coming up at 123 Main Street. So as I search for this address here in this dropdown, you'll see that it starts to give me all of the properties that meet this criteria. So I can scroll down and find the 123 Main Street that I'm working for. I can click on this and be taken to a property details page. So this is, of course, most common, simplest way of being able to pinpoint a property in your research. The other nice way that this application makes it easy for you moving forward is being able to search by owner name. So like I said, let's say you have a listing presentation coming up and a seller, said, hey, I own this property at, 123 Main Street in Los Angeles. And maybe you can't find it, but maybe you have their owner name, or maybe someone came into your open house. The nice part is you can still search by an owner name here. So I'll search City of Los Angeles. Let's say I wanted to find properties owned by the City of Los Angeles. So as I search this owner name, as I scroll down, you see that I see all of these properties that are owned by the City of Los Angeles. So let's say it was John Smith that you have a presentation for. You can search their name here and see all of the properties associated with them. So it makes it easier to find them. And then the third way that I said, sometimes you might need to find a property would be by the assessor's parcel number. So we'll go over these a little bit more, but there will be some cases where properties don't have, an address yet, and the only identifying piece of information is the identification number from the county assessor where that property is held. It's commonly referred to as an APN. You might also see it as an AIN from time to time, but really helpful at being able to pinpoint properties, but then also do things like look up your property tax bills for clients. So once again, Farm in here makes it easy to do that. I can just search for a parcel number here, and same thing, it'll find properties just based off of that parcel number here. So if you're ever in a pinch, maybe you can't find the property based off the address, maybe you're not finding it by the owner name, always default to that assessor's parcel number. It's going to be really effective at pinpointing properties. But there also might be times where maybe you don't have any of that information. Maybe you're not finding it by the property address, and maybe they don't own, the home in their name. Maybe they hold it in an LLC, and maybe you don't have a parcel number, but you really need to track down a property. The nice part about this tool, Farm in here, is it makes it easy to do a map search for effectively any property in the nation. So when you're on this homepage, if you click on this properties tab once again, which is where you'll do most of your individual property research, you'll be taken to a map. So this is where you can essentially, drag yourself around on a map, or, search for a specific location up here at the top right. And as you move your map around or zoom in, for example, you'll get to see which properties are in this area here. The other nice part about zooming into this map is as you zoom in, each of these properties, it gives you a nice estimated value for each of these properties. So you can kind of get a nice range. But let's say you have a sense that there is a property here, on this street here, and this was the property that you're interested in. You can always click on it here and you'll see this property. So it makes it easy where maybe you don't need, the address, the owner name, or parcel number. You can simply locate yourself on a map, click on the property here, and then click on this property to get more information on it. So ultimately, knowing, what you have access to, what pieces of information you have, and being able to pinpoint, that property that way can be really effective. So that will be within this Farm in here application under this property section here. So being able to come in here, from a map. And also too, just have an awareness you can change the look of the map too. So let's say I wanted a nice satellite view. Maybe it's a little easier to tell which property is which. I can come in here, click on it, and get more information as I need. So that is step two, finding properties, so knowing what you need and the different ways to go about it. And then step three, this is where we'll spend most of the time today, is knowing what to look for. So let's say we're in this application, we found the correct property that we need, to do research in. We've searched for it. Now we're on this nice property details page here. So now we have information, but now we really need to know like what to look for. What are the things we were looking for before this presentation? What are the things I should tell this seller, in this meeting that he might need to be aware of or they might need to be aware of? So ultimately, when I'm looking at properties, some of the main criterias that I tend to look at, tend to, tell our clients about would be ownership investing, the property characteristics and history of that property, and then the financials of that property. These are the three main areas that I tend to see the most red flags, the most areas of discussion, the most areas that require, additional documentation, etc. The ownership investing, making sure that you're, verifying that the person that you're speaking to is that correct person on title. They have the ability to sell, their name is listed on the grant deed. But going a step further than just seeing the names on title is seeing how they're holding title, meaning the vesting. Are they holding title as a trust, as joint tenants, as tenants in common, etc., and knowing the implications of each of those? We'll go into those briefly. Also, having awareness for the property characteristics such as the bed, bath, zoning, making sure it meets what your clients think, and then also the financials, seeing loans, making sure the property is not over encumbered, seeing anything that could be a financial hindrance in that property. So we'll go into one of these and show you how effectively you can really answer a lot of these questions. So you stand out in that, meeting with a seller potentially and say, hey, I've done a lot of research on the property. Here's some things we might need to be aware of, and you can really have a nice educated conversation. So once you've clicked on, one of these properties within this application, initially you're going to be taken to this property details page. A nice feature about this property details page before we get into it is this nice new report navigation bar here on the right side of the screen. So makes it really easy to jump to and from different sections to answer those key questions. So let's say, for example, I wanted to learn more about the current ownership and transaction history. I can click on this tab on the right side and I'll be taken directly to that section within this property overview, or maybe I needed to learn more about the property value and comparables, same thing. I have this nice nav bar that I can click through. And now actually moving through this report to see, okay, how can I, look at these reports? What should I look for and how can it help me best explain, a potential sale situation to this seller? So we'll start with this nice overview tab here. And already, like I said, this will help make sure that you're talking to the right person, verify that the property meets your client's expectations as well. So one of those first few things that you'll see are records brought in from the LA County Assessor. The nice thing about these applications from our title companies is that they are pulling their data feeds from the county assessor directly. So all the data that you're seeing here is what the county assessor is seeing as well, regardless of what county it is also. So if it's Orange County, a different county in North California, you'll see that information here. You also get a nice estimated value for this property. And then in this initial section here, you get a nice answer to some of those questions, such as making sure that you know who the current owner is and it matches who you're speaking to or about to speak to. So, for example, in this case, I see the current owner on title. I see that it is a trustee of this family trust right here. So if I'm speaking to this person, I can say, okay, are you on title? Or maybe if they're not on title, maybe they're a relative of someone that is on title, and I can have an explanation and say, hey, I'm seeing that the actual owner is this. Can you tell me more about maybe how you're related to them, etc. So maybe before I, go and drive someone, I can have that conversation. I also have a nice sense of the vesting of the property. So for example, in this case, they're holding their property in a family trust. Where this vesting section gets really important is knowing the implications of the vesting, one, in terms of the type of documentation that they will need to bring to a transaction. So let's say, for example, I see that they're holding title in some form of entity, like a trust or an LLC. It's a great indicator that you can tell them, hey, you may need to bring these documents to that transaction for the title company to review. Ultimately, they need to make sure that the people signing on behalf of those entities are the people that are able to, and then also making sure that everyone that needs to be involved is involved. So ultimately, seeing vesting, seeing an entity can help you stand out in that you can best prepare that client for getting some of those documents prepared before they go into escrow. And now they're scrambling to find those trust documents, for example. The other key part about vesting to have an awareness of is the implication upon situations where maybe one of the people on title have passed away. So a lot of the times things like trusts, for example, have that taken care of where if a party on, title passes away, their remaining interest can easily pass to other people on the trust. But there are forms of vesting where that isn't the case, like tenants in common. So oftentimes we'll see situations where maybe there's more than one party on title. Maybe there's two people and they hold title as tenants in common, and one of those parties passes away, and the remaining parties think they're automatically going to, get the remaining interest in that property. But just based off the way that vesting works, that's not the case. So ultimately, it is nice here to be able to make sure you're, seeing that you're talking to the correct people or that the people that you're talking to have some connection to who's on title, but then also making sure that, the vesting matches how their clients do and then prepare them for the implications of the forms of vesting. And on these slides here that I shared with you, we do have a nice guide where you can actually break down the form of vesting and how that plays out in different scenarios. So on our guide here, where it says ownership investing help, if you click this guide on our website, we have nice buyer and seller guides which walk through the entire title and escrow process. And one of the pages on page 13 of this guide is a nice common ways of holding title vesting chart where it shows the different forms of vesting. So for example, the property that we were looking at is a trust right here. But like I said, there are situations where maybe there's tenancy in common situations where maybe someone on title did pass away. So I can look at tenancy in common here. I can look at the death column and I can match these two together and I can see what happens when one of the parties on title passes away. So I can let them know that, in this case, when one of the co-owner, passes away, his or her interest passes by will to the divisi or heirs, no survivorship rights, meaning that the remaining person on title does not automatically get that interest. So it's helpful in the sense that you can kind of walk them through these things, show them these guides, show them how their form of investing might impact things. But also a keynote. By no means should you be expected to be the end all be all expert in these things, reading the forms of vesting, know how they will impact things. That's where having a relationship with a title representative can help you, where you can have that initial form of research, say, hey, Grant, I think I'm seeing here where, they hold title as tenants in common and one of them passed away. So I think it works this way. Can you help me confirm? But ultimately, you having the ability to, have these resources, at least in that conversation with the seller, you can navigate these a little bit better. Okay, let me go back to farming here really quick. So that is all just within this first section. You can get some nice questions answered and then also have some nice productive conversations with those clients. And then I'm moving through these property details. Property facts, like I said, a key part to be aware of here is just making sure that the characteristics match what your clients think of. We do see some times where maybe clients have done, a remodel to the property, added square footage, etc., but maybe it's not reflected in the assessor records yet. Maybe that's a cause of concern for your clients. Maybe they're scared, worried, etc. The nice thing is you can give them the peace of mind to say, hey, sometimes there can be delay in the assessors updating their records, but also there are means to rectify any differences that you see in assessor records versus what you see on these platforms versus what actually exists with your clients' properties. We have nice resources on this guide as well that I shared. For example, let's say you wanted to see some handy forms where your clients can update, some of the property characteristics. Like let's say, for example, the square footage should be, 4,500. Maybe they added, an additional 500 square feet. If I go to this LA County Assessor Forms page, they have a nice handy form called the property data change request that clients can submit, for example. And this is specifically LA County, but just to show you that there are means where if you ever see, some of these reports and maybe your client that you're speaking to is really concerned, worried, freaking out in that scenario, at least you can let them know maybe where some of those discrepancies lie and that there are means to rectify those. And of course, if you're ever in those situations, reach out to me. I'm happy to remind you about where to go for that information. And then going back to this property here. So like I said, that would be the property characteristics, making sure that it meets what your property owner thinks, especially if you're going to market, being able to market that accurately to what the county records show. And now going to the current ownership and transaction history section. We kind of already covered this in a way, making sure that the person that you're speaking to is listed on title, also paying attention to the form of vesting they own. knowing that really can, potentially slow things down, in estate planning purposes or needing to track down documents. So being able to tell them that early. The nice point about this section that I wanted to mention, though, is that it does give you a nice few data points here. One that initially stands out to me in this section is that it will show you the open mortgages related to this property. So no longer do you need to go through and try to like find the different mortgage documents and see which mortgages are still open. This will show you those automatically. So in this case, it says this property has one open mortgage. It shows you when that mortgage was recorded. It shows you the original loan balance along with an estimated remaining balance for that loan, along with the type of loan, potential interest rate, etc. So you can have a nice sense of potentially how much they need to pay off when they go to sell their property. And you also get a couple of other documents here, such as the actual deed from when they purchased their property. So this was the original purchase of their home. The nice part too is you can also download these documents. So let's say I wanted to see the most recent deed that's on title, and I wanted to see how this impacted title here. You always have these download buttons next to some of these deeds where once you click download here, it'll start downloading these documents for you. And let's say I wanted to see their original purchase deed. Now that it's downloaded, I can click on it and I'll see this actual property deed right here. And I can scroll down, see when they initially purchased this property, or maybe a more recent deed where they changed the way that they held title. Same thing, I can click on this document, scroll down, and I'll see more information once again. And then keynote two, there may be some times where you're sitting with a client and maybe they want, more of their deeds through their title history, where there will be a difference potentially where people maybe purchase their property, but maybe after they've purchased it for 3, 4, 5 years, they've decided to update the way they hold title and they record further deeds, maybe 2 extra deeds, 3 extra deeds, and maybe they wanted a complete history of that. The nice part is you can go throughout the title history on this application by clicking View Full Transaction History. This will take you to the big chain of title where you'll see the deeds going back throughout time in this property's history. Key part about this, before looking at this and getting overwhelmed, it's helpful just to break these sections into two buckets. You're really looking at deeds related to title transfers. Those could be original purchases where a new owner's come in on title, or simply just title related updates. Maybe putting your property into a trust, taking one person off of title. The second type of deed you'll see in this chain of title history would be mortgages or mortgage-related documents. So new mortgages, maybe refinances, releases of mortgages, or foreclosure-related documents related to mortgages. And then being able to understand this effectively, have an awareness that by default, looking at this date, it goes from newest deed to oldest deed as you scroll down. You can always click on this column and have it swapped automatically and go from oldest to newest. You can also pay attention to the type and document name to have a better understanding of the type of document you're looking at. So for example, this is a title transfer and it's a intra-family transfer versus this is also a sale or transfer, but more of a regular grant deed, a purchase with a purchase price associated with it. Or in this case, all of these documents are related to mortgages here, and I can see that they are mortgage related documents. And also the nice part about this is once again, you can download these deeds and have direct access to them on your own and provide those to your client. And then one last helpful point about this section here to make it a little bit simpler when looking at it is pay attention to this icon here. This stands for current owner. So anytime you're looking through this chain of title and you're looking at these deeds, all you really need to pay attention to if you're talking about the current owner are the deeds that are related to them. And then finishing up with these pages here, the next section would be this property value and sales comparables. So really helpful in being able to have that seller conversation and say what the estimated value is, but then also have comparable sales to back that up. And the nice part is this application will bring in both sales that happened on market on the MLS, but then also off market sales as well. So beyond this initial estimated value you get, which also has a confidence score to say how confident they are in this estimated value, you can also create a nice comparable sales report that will be in this final property profile that this app will generate for you. So what you can do is always click view comparables and customize here. And this will take you into a nice section of this app where you can see the comparable sales that it's bringing in, but then also adjust how it's bringing in these comparable sales. So let's say I wanted to go further back in time, and then maybe I wanted to expand my radius of sales. So maybe I'll go 1.7 miles and I can see how that updates here and have nice comparable sales that get brought into this report for me. So in a couple of seconds, I can get some nice comparable sales. And then finishing up with the financial aspect of being able to understand a property will be this foreclosure activity. The nice part about this is it makes it really easy for you to look at this and see, okay, is this property currently in the foreclosure process? Are they behind on their mortgage? Do they need to make up, any of those payments, etc.? It will let you know that here, whether they are, in the foreclosure process. And the nice part too is if you do see this, you also once again have access to those documents. So let's say they need to get in touch with that lender and see how far behind they are in payments and became made whole. They can always scroll back up to this current ownership and transaction history section, go to the view full transaction history, and you would see that notice of default document, like I said, and you can download it. And then one other key section too would be property taxes and assessments. This is another thing where we do see some red flags in a transaction from time to time, especially in scenarios where people might be delinquent on property taxes. So if you go to that property tax and assessment situation, you can see, for example, this property here is tax delinquent in the 2019 tax year. So right now that could have, brought in some late fees, etc., but is something that your clients will need to take care of in that transaction. So once again, a nice, helpful piece of information that you can let them know about ahead of time and get them prepared for. And then finishing up in terms of actually creating this document, the nice last thing before we create a finalized report is that each of these properties in this application will give you a nice instant seller net proceeds. So it'll base it based off that estimated value that it brought in for this property, based off the sales price here. It'll also factor in broker fees, estimated closing costs, and then also the estimated loan balance for this specific property. So takes out a lot of, the legwork in terms of being able to sit with that seller, say, hey, here's the general situation of your property. I've looked at it. Here are the deeds. Here's what ownership is showing like. Here's what taxes look like. And on top of that, based off of not only your loan balance, but also all of the closing costs associated with selling this property, here's what you could walk away with. And that's all just from a quick search on this application, searching by an address, clicking on the property, and now you can have a really nice, simple conversation with that homeowner. And then finishing up this report. So taking that nice initial snapshot and saying, okay, here's what the ownership looks like. Here's what vesting looks like. Here's what the financials look like. Now I want a nice report that I can share or maybe bring to my client when I'm meeting with them. When you're in this property details page, you can always look for this share button right here. Once you've clicked on that, you have an ability to personalize how this report looks, which I recommend. So as you personalize it, you can choose which look you want for this report. I'll choose this default version. You can bring in your information for the cover page of the report. You can also bring in your client's name. So I'll say client name, and it'll be brought into the report for me. And then you can also choose which parts of this report get brought in for you. By default, it's going to bring in all the sections that we looked at, all of the documents that we downloaded as well, and you can click Generate Report. And then in a couple of seconds, you'll have a nice report that you can bring to that client meeting. And it'll look something like this. You can click Download, and now you have a nice report that you can share with your client. Same thing, it's going to have all that same information we looked at, the vesting, current owner information, the most recent deed transfers, estimated values, tax information, etc. But ultimately, a lot of the pieces to let you know what you need to deal with ahead of time. And then step five, that was turning it into a report with step four. Step five is understanding the limitations of these reports. So although it's awesome that you'll be able to come in here and generate these reports and get nice deep dives on properties, whether you're on your computer, on the go, etc., know that these public data systems that you have access to do have their limits. So a lot of the times what these are going to be pulling from, like I said, are the county assessor records. They're going to show deed transfers, mortgages, foreclosures, tax information, etc. So you get a nice sense of a lot of the financial and ownership implications in the transaction. But there might be more beyond that initial public data search that require a full title examination, a full preliminary title report. A lot of the times those will be judgments or liens tied to a person's name, for example, maybe that aren't yet associated with that specific property, or more neighborhood specific things like maybe a neighborhood easements, CC&Rs, etc. Those require a full preliminary title report as well. So in a lot of the cases, you might, be doing a research dive, but maybe there's some, easements you're concerned about, or maybe a judgment, tied to that person's name. Maybe you have an actual listing presentation coming up. In that case, you'll want a full preliminary title report. That's where it'll do a full title examine, deep dive, and of course, you can go to our website as well and order those for you. So if you go to lunatitleteam.com, you can go to our request a preliminary title report and order that report here as well. So ultimately, leaning on a resource like this, Farming here, in order to give you a nice initial snapshot of a property, being able to come in and research properties effectively and get a nice snapshot